Hello, this is Donald L. Potter in Odessa, Texas, June 15th, 2017. And this is a presentation of my book, Beyond Blend Phonics, a natural and easy method for teaching advanced English morphology through the languages of origin. I'm really proud of this book, and I'm really glad to be able to do this training video. If you purchased my book, I'd like to go ahead and say thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let me begin by introducing you to a fantastic young lady by the name of Allie. Allie came to my school in the 5th grade, and she needed some help with reading. So I first took her through my Blend Phonics Lessons and Stories. This is a basic phonics program for students of any age. And when she finished that, she was really doing good. And then we started on the advanced phase. Allie is a really happy-go-lucky, fun to work with student. We just have a great time. She has an awesome attitude, never complains, works really hard for me, sharp as a tack. And as you can tell, she really enjoys learning. Now, as you can tell from the smile on her face, by the way, here's the phonovisual chart that we went through with my Blend Phonics Lessons and Stories. It only took us just, a month or two maybe to get through that before we started on Blend Phonics to catch her up on her basic phonics, which I might mention she did not get at her former school, where that they focused mostly on sight words and guided reading. Here is my book. What I want you to notice what she has in her hand. This is a multi-sensory approach, is the way that I teach it. In other words, you use all of the senses. So when we would study the words, she writes them into this spiral notebook. You can buy those at any of the stores for $2, $3, $4. You can get you a good one. Notice that she's writing with a dip pen. Now that's not a necessary part of the program, although it's a fun part of the program. And I get a special nib that's called ballpoint nib, and that's that ink right there is not a permanent ink, so you can, if it gets on the kids, they can get it off. But what I wanted to say was I also use fountain pens. I have a lot of different fountain pens. You can buy really good fountain pens nowadays, pretty inexpensive. I started myself writing cursive in 1st grade in 1953 with Miss Pearl Monroe, my awesome 1st grade teacher. And so I'm not allergic to teaching it to even kindergarten and 1st grade. I've actually got a lot of experience doing that, and I have a book called Shortcut to Cursive, which Allie studied, by the way, that teaches cursive and really quick. But I also have a book called Shortcut to Manuscript. Whatever you do, be sure the students have good handwriting, and that's the teacher's responsibility to make sure that they develop that handwriting. Okay, now we're going to launch into the program. Now that you see the first student to go through the whole program with me, and by the way, we went through the program, we made some improvements and changes, and Allie actually has some great ideas for improving the book. So the May 2017 edition that is now available will have all of the updates and revisions and so on that we made as a result of the experience of teaching the whole book. Now let's take a look at the book. A morpheme, by the way, is a meaningful part of a word. A phoneme is the sound element of a word, and they don't directly bear meaning, but when you put the phonemes together, then you come up with the morphemes, and we'll be looking at that. If you're not familiar with the terminology, by the way, you do not have to. This program is easy because that as a parent or teacher, if you want to teach your students the advanced levels of morphology, but you've never had a class in it or training, we're going to take care of the whole thing for you right here. I break it down, I explain it, and you can even learn with your students, and at the end they will be accomplished readers, and you also will improve your knowledge of this aspect of written English. The book was first written in 2011, revised in 2015, and there is a 2017 revision. My websites, by the way, are www.donpotter.net and www.blendphonics.org, and you are invited to visit those. There's a lot of information there, most of it free. Here's my dedication to all the students that I've worked with. here's a table of contents. We're going to be studying Anglo-Saxon prefixes and suffixes is the first section. And then we have 3 sections, 3, 4, and 5 chapters. Romance, prefixes, suffixes, and roots. And by Romance, we're talking about the, by the way, Anglo-Saxon is a Germanic element of English. And then the Romance element is going to be mostly Latin and French, the Latin and French influence. And there's some charts at the end of the book that I'm going to go over with you that's just going to blow your mind when you see how the students that study learn the Romance and morphemes are going to be able to improve their reading. I'm going to save that little surprise to the end, so be sure and stick with me all the way. Then we're going to do Greek combining forms. This is especially for science words. And then we're going to do homonyms. They're not directly dealt with in my blend phonics lessons and stories. And so I have several pages of those here. And then we have the appendices, a brief history, word counts, instructions, and a little bit about me in case you're interested. I do want to acknowledge the people that had a profound influence on me. These are 3 of the many. Dr. Earl Eugene Roth Jr. Really encouraged me to teach morphemes and to go beyond the basic phonics. Dr. Marcia K. Henry, past president of the International Dyslexia Society, used to be called the Orton Society. Anyway, she wrote an essay in 1990 that I read on organizing reading instruction, or organizing decoding instructions. And I got permission from her and the society to republish that on my website. And that would be a great introduction to how I go about teaching the levels of language here. She has a book called Words, just Word, W-R-D-S, and there's a subtitle, but that I have taught to a lot of students over the years. It's been really helped me to be successful with my students. And among the things, she's written several other books. A very nice, cordial lady. I've enjoyed corresponding with her over the years. And then Dr. George Gonzalez was the professor of ESL and bilingual at the University of Texas, Pan American, Edinburgh, Texas. I studied under him off and on for about 7 years, attending workshops that he did. And I even have a document online with all of my notes from his lectureships. And he taught us how, especially from fourth grade and up, he had a thing he called sentence time. And what he did, he had sentences that the students would study. No, not defining time. He used sentences, defining time. I had to think a minute there. I'm doing this without notes, but anyway, defining time. And he taught us how to teach mega words, literally thousands of words a year, by using parallel sentences. And in the first sentence, we teach a vocabulary, and in the second sentence, the students learn the meaning of the words using words that we've already taught them. And so what I've done here is to teach English-speaking students, or it could be used. This can be used with anybody that knows some English, bilingual students that already know quite a bit of English. But any student that knows English, what I've done, I've used ESL techniques to teach advanced English morphology to young children. And as we go through, you'll see this. I owe a great debt of gratitude to Dr. Jorge Gonzalez, para ayudarme a aprender mucho en estos asuntos. I'm also a Spanish teacher. Anyway, pressing on. First chapter is the Anglo-Saxon prefixes, Anglo-Saxon English from the days of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Now we're going to go fast. I just want to introduce the book. Notice that the prefixes are at the front of the word. So we have for, as in forget, forbid, forgive, foreclose, forsake, and we explain the meaning of the words. like there's a hard one there, 1-4, foreclose. They will foreclose on Marina's house today. They will take away the house because she could not make the monthly payments. Well, foreclose is a pretty big word for, say, a second or even a third grader. But when you use it in a parallel sentence like this, it makes sense. So it makes it easy for the students to pick up this vocabulary. And even if their knowledge is not real precise, it gives them a start in building their sensitivity, their statistical learning of the vocabulary of English. Next we have B. Notice I drew a line. There's a dash after B, so I have attempted to separate the prefixes, suffixes, and roots so that the students can kind of focus on those and see the commonality between the different words. Then we have in, over, and again, I don't want to belabor this. You can see all of these. These are Anglo-Saxon. They come from the Germanic side of English. Then we have, and I actually I had fun with this. If you look at 1-37 here on page 6, Walter and Mabel Potter's twin sons look alike. They look exactly the same. One was Mr. Potter's dad. Now, it's a true sentence. That was my grandma and grandpa, and they had two boys that were exact twins. So as you go through, you may learn a little bit about me and my family. I thought that was all right to personalize my book. And the kids that study this at my school enjoy that I put my name in there. So chapter 2, Anglo-Saxon suffixes. Okay, suffixes go on the end of the word. So notice how that I drew a line. Here we have ed. I drew a line, walked, hopped, hoped, skipped, batted, patted, and so on. It's not a precise division for the syllables. My point was to emphasize the morpheme. And when you read these words, you can have the kids use their sounding out skills to sound them out. If they get close, if they don't get quite close, then you just tell them what it is, and they'll understand it. And then as they read it in a sentence, they get experience reading it in context. And then when they see like here, skip, the little boy skipped down the rocky path. He was jumping with little steps. So the definition is in italics. There'll be a phrase or another word. Here's batted. Notice here we have hit the ball. So we use a sentence in the first, the new word in the first sentence, and we give the meaning in the second. I learned all of this from Dr. George Gonzalez. It proved, as I taught bilingual students, it proved to be a tremendous aid in boosting their vocabulary very quickly. And so we'll work with teaching English to non-English speakers. I am putting to the service of teaching advanced English over the head perhaps of some of these young students to bring them up, to bring their level of reading up by introducing these. And the kids absolutely love it. Pressing on. Here we have full, less, and underneath in parentheses, not always, but we often give what is the meaning of it. So FUL is full. So careful's full of care, fearful's full of fear, tearful's full of fear, useful's full of use, helpful's full of help, and hopeful's full of hope. And the kids pick up on this. So once they get done reading these words, then when they're reading other literature and they see that full on the end, they're automatically going to trigger that basic meaning and be able to read many words beyond the ones that are in this book. So when they finish reading my 730 some words, they're going to be able to read thousands of other words that have the same morphemes in them. So we're not just memorizing vocabulary, but we're learning the elements that make up the words. And again, Raymond Larita, if you look at his material that I've got on my website by Raymond Larita, it goes into a lot of explanation. Ray told me one time, he called himself the spelling doctor, and he told me one time that when you get in, well, we'll see later, when you get into the Latin elements, when the thing really starts to take off. But anyway, here you have some more able, ish, so on. Now we have the Romance prefixes. This is where Raymond Larita, this is where you really started getting some leverage. Um, the growth of vocabulary when you're just working with basic phonology is more or less arithmetical. But when you start teaching the Romance elements, there are so many words and long words and meaningful words that you start getting a geometric progression. We might say you start making quantum leaps, and that's where you're going to get your money back with interest for having purchased my book. Pressing on. Now there's different sections. The Romance prefixes from Latin and French, some of them end in a vowel, and those are called open syllables, and they're long. For example, RE, the E's at the end. So you have return, react, remember. We give the meaning underneath, and then we give, now by the way, it was Allie's idea to put these numbers because we were just writing down the words and we'd have to think, well, where were we at? What was the last word we did? And we couldn't find it in the book, and so she said, why don't you put some numbers in there? So I went back and I put these numbers. So this is the section, the third section of the book, and this is the number 1. So 3-1. So 3-1 will always be just this word here. And as she wrote them in her journal, she would always write the number and then the word. By the way, we did not write the sentences, didn't have time, which would not be a bad idea if you got the time for that. Or you're making homework maybe, but we didn't do that. Then we have D, which is from or way, and this all brings back my Spanish that I learned. Pre, by, three, again, you can look at all those. Pro, co, coexist, cooperate. Let's just look, 329. Coexist means that two things exist at the same time and place. When Mr. Potter was a kid, some of the farmers used horses and some used tractors. Farmers with tractors and farmers with horses coexisted. So you can see how that even the youngest child, even a first or second grader, can get the gist of this word by reading my sentences. And again, thanks to Dr. Gonzalez for teaching me this technique, which I have employed in this book. Now we have some more prefixes, but these are enclosed syllables. And if you look up here at DIS, see the S on the end? Well, that S right there closes a syllable, which makes the vowel short. It's not dice, it's disc. And then here we give the possible meaning, separate or undoing. So we have dislike, displace, display, and so on. Then we have sub, miss, in. Again, we have all these words. And again, once they learn these words and they get the meaning of what sub means, when they're reading, their subconscious mind is going, or conscious too, is going to be thinking about these meanings, and there'll be a leverage to allow them to read other words besides the one in the book and tremendously increase their vocabulary. Again, we have M, not or on, X, trans, which is across, non, un or una, there it is, mild, bad, malnutrition, malfunction, benefit, benefactor, interaction, interstate. To me, I see no reason. For example, the word benefactor. I know that's a big word, but why should it be off? Why should it be off limit to little kids just because that it's a big word and because we don't know how to teach it? This is how you can introduce the students to these words and have second graders reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and things like that require knowledge of these kinds of words. Then we have enter, from among and between. Intra, intro, post. Okay, let's pick up a little speed here. Oh, this is really interesting. I bet many of you, I'm sure, have not heard of disguised prefixes, and you can study them here. This is one of the many things I learned from Miss Hendry and some of my other teachers. A disguised prefix, for example, con means with, but if the next letter is an L, an M, or an R, then the spelling changes to col, com, and cor, but you have the same meaning. So these are disguised, and people don't see them sometimes and realize what's going on, because cor means with, com means with, con means with, col means with. So this is really going to help the kids a lot. Allie and I had a blast reading through these words. Okay, pressing on. More of the camouflage or chameleon suffixes. Another page. Chapter 4 is Romance suffixes. Now we go to the end, and again this is more on word building. Ist, if, like active, addictive, courage, and here you have these words. Again, if they don't know, I always had Allie try to sound out the word, and if she couldn't quite get it, then I just told her what it was, and then she got to read it again in a sentence, so you're getting all that reinforcement. Or I even talked about one of my professors there, I see. So we're getting all these Latin prefixes. And here we got the T-I-O-N and S-I-O-N and so on. Then we do the Romance roots. Now, roots are between the suffixes and prefixes. And there's a little explanation there I won't go over. Rupt means to break. So rupture, erupt, eruption, corrupt, corruption, bankrupt. They all have the idea of break, and I explain it with my with my Morphology Made Easy. Again, we have port means to carry, form means to shape, track means to pull, like a tractor. Script means to write, spec means to see, and a lot of these words are actually in their working vocabulary already. So struck, to build, flex, miss, pin. Okay, we're going to go through these. You can study those with your students. Then the Greek combining forms aren't actually prefixes, roots, and suffixes. They're just two forms that come together. So like phono, telephone, phoneme, phonics, phonetics, phonograph, phonogram, and so on. Photo, self, those all come from Greek. And just make it fun. Read it with them. I don't really go back and do a lot of testing of this. You could if you wanted to. When she wrote all the words down, we would go back like the next day and just read through them and see how I remembered them. By writing them down, they can take them home, and it can be a reference book. Their spiral can be a reference book. She actually gave me hers as a memento, which I'm keeping in a file for the rest of my life as a record of the first student to go through the book that I wrote. Took me quite a while, by the way. Then we have homonyms, words that sound alike but are spelled different, mostly Anglo-Saxon. So here you have roll and roll, it's, sun, and you can see how I use the same technique that Dr. Gonzalez taught me, the parallel sentences, to teach those. And I'm going to just skip through really fast. Here's a little history of my development of the program for interest sake, if you'd like to see that. And then we have a overview of the language, which is very interesting. Historical overview. I like this here. These sentences here, like a long time ago there was a place that had no name. It was filled with men and women that could not do a lot of things. And that's the Fleisch-Kincaid grade level 2. But the minute we start adding Latin and French words, such as England, Roman legions, conquered, considered indigenous, and so on, we jump up to 11th grade. So you can see how that teaching this level, as we do in this book, the Latin and French levels, we're going to increase from this basic first, second, maybe third grade reading level up to more advanced reading levels that will allow the kids to handle more advanced literature and write more sophisticated compositions and more expressive compositions because they have more resources at their command. This page, all right, hang on, it's going to blow your mind. Now take a look at this. English vocabulary origins. And I mentioned where I get this from The Origin of English Language by Joseph William, one of my favorite writers, by the way. Let me explain this really quick. If you take the first 1,000 most used words in English language, 83% are English. 11% French, 2% Latin, 2% Danish, and 2% other. Now you can take these two right here, the 11 and the 2, and add those together and come up with 13 because the French and the Latin are both Romance, okay? So now look at this. English, that's Anglo-Saxon, okay? It's just the way he's talking about the Anglo-Saxon here. It's 83%. And the Latin is what? 13%. Watch what happens when you go to the next 1,000 most used words. The English drops to 34%. The Romance goes to 46 and 11, which would be 57% of those the second 2,000 words come from French and Latin. So you can see that this basic element down here is going to hold you down into the first 1,000 words, which is maybe you need to read through about third grade. But when you get above that, it all changes because it's not English anymore. Now it's mostly Latin. And look at the statistics here. I won't do the addition, but look at this. You got the Anglo-Saxon going down, 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 right? Kind of tapering off here. Over here, it's maintaining a high rate up even to the 10,000th word. That's why my book, Beyond Blend Phonics, is so important, because it is according to the reality of the language, not only by grade level, but the language you need in your life to be a successful reader. And so this book can be used in at least third grade and up. And with some good students, I wouldn't hesitate to work with second grade. And maybe some really outstanding students might like to work on it in even at the end of first grade. Now, over here on page 121, we just have a word count, which shows you how many words there are, 732 words, and it shows how many there are in each one of the chapters. I thought that would be interesting for you to see what you were doing, how much you, and what the kids are going to be learning. And then there's some instruction for teachers there. I just go through and give some interesting information. Highly recommend you read Dr. Henry's Organizing Decoding Instructions. It's an awesome essay that will be like an introduction to this book right here. And again, if you get a chance to teach her program words or any of her other books or programs, you're going to love them, I guarantee you. And then this is a little bit about myself and some other books that I have written. So this concludes our introduction here, our training introduction to Beyond Blend Phonics. I want to thank you for buying my books, and I believe for sure that when your student gets done finishing all of the learning all the morphemes and homonyms in this book, they're going to be a lot better reader, just like our dear friend Allie. And me and Allie will say goodbye to you and wishing you all the best.